To me, we are the most beautiful creatures in the whole world.
Looking at this generation, feeling hopeless. Looking across my shoulder, keep my eyes open, keep my mind focused. Ain't no hocus pocus, cause when it's all said and done, they will all know us. Trying to keep us down, keep us at our lowest. They thought you broke us, but you woke us. Be a leader, not a follower, modern day Moses. Cause I'm the water to the seas that become roses. Don't let no one put you down. Let me see you smile. And don't cry, daughter. And don't cry, baby. Get up, my son, nothing can hold you back. And don't cry, children. Shine, shine. You're beautiful inside. Rise up, rise up. Don't you know you can fly? The darker the berry, the sweeter the juice. You better like it, speaking the truth. Just like a panther, inside of the loose. I stand for the people and fight for the youth. Don't let no one put you down. Let me see you smile. Don't cry, daughter. Don't cry, baby. Get up, my son, nothing can hold you back. And don't cry, children. Shine, shine. You're beautiful inside. Rise up, rise up. Don't you know you can fly? The world will judge you, but God knows your heart. They say they love you and leave you in the dark. But child, when you fall down, you better get up. Go on, dust your crown. Victory is a word. Don't cry, daughter. Don't cry, baby. Get up, my son, nothing can hold you back. And don't cry, children. Shine, shine. You're beautiful inside. Rise up, rise up. Don't you know you can fly?
Wake up, wake up. You've got the power. You've got my people in the east, yo, you gotta wake up. Midwest, dirty South, yo, you gotta stand up. All my homies in the west, yo, you gotta wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up.
Wake up, everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more backward thinking, time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There's so much hatred.
It's everybody's wake-up call time. I can't sleep too long. Why they do the people wrong? Let's clean the world up before they sweep you gone. This is real talk. You can peek through songs. So when you feel weak, these words will keep you strong and help make a change for the better. It's hard for one to do it, but we can make some changes together. Stand up here, give thanks to the man upstairs. Put the egos and the pride to the side, regardless. Just be role models, parents, artists. We can make it change, and we can make it the hardest. If you gonna make a baby, you should make them the smartest. Let them know good and bad, right from wrong, how to roll with the punches when life moves on. And the stress won't take toll if you don't sweat it. The world won't get no better if we don't let it. Let the negative energy ride. Keep hope alive. It's about time that we open our eyes. Wake up.
Everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more backward thinking. Time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There's so much hatred. Wake up, 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 wake up.
Yeah, well, y'all best to vote. I don't care about the guns you told. Listen to me like you listen to Fahrenheit 9/11.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Kingdom Conversations. It is Monday night. We are gearing up now for part two. Thank you for those of you who were with us last week for part one of Kingdom Conversations, Black Lives Matter versus Black Lives Are Equal. On last week, we had a dynamic conversation dealing with 3/5 or 5/5. And tonight we want to continue part two of the conversation where we're actually talking about matter versus equal. So we welcome all of you to the conversation. Thank you for those of you who are joining us by way of Facebook Live. Thank you for those of you who have taken the opportunity to share it on your pages or to invite your friends to this important conversation that we're going to be having on tonight. And I want to assure you that you are a part of the conversation. Your thoughts, your input, your feedback, the things that you express on the thread, we will be incorporating as many of those thoughts and ideas into our conversation. So we welcome you. And so we bless this moment. We bless this opportunity. We bless every viewer. We bless the presenter. We bless the panelists. We bless the conversation, the dialogue. This is a blessed moment, and we are a blessed people. Hallelujah. In your name, through your power. This is so, and so we let it be. Amen and amen. Dr. Pulley, what's up?
Good evening, Bishop Hector. How are you doing?
Amen. Dr. Pulley, I am safe and well, thank God, as I've been saying each and every day. Come on back to us. Amen. But how are you doing this evening? There we go.
I am great.
We don't wait till it's time to start pressing buttons. Praise the Lord. Yes. Yes. Come on here, sir. Hallelujah.
Oh, goodness.
How are you?
I'm grateful. I am just feeling really grateful, really good today. Coming off of Father's Day that was just so tremendous. And I'm just feeling good. I'm feeling the love.
Yes, amen. You are a biological father, a spiritual father, a kingdom father. You are.
Yes.
Yes, you're just a father.
Yes, I love to do it and be it in the earth. Yes.
Yes. Come on. Yes. Amen. So we let it be. Amen. We're going to let you be. Amen. But so we've been talking, Dr. Pulley, about the Black Lives Matter versus, and that's the hot word tonight, versus, quite frankly. Black Lives Matter versus Black Lives Are Equal. My understanding is that you have something to say. My understanding is that you have a whole lot to say about that. So
I do. I have much to say about that.
Come on, let your voice be made known on the earth. Talk to the people on tonight, good sir. What's up?
Well, thank you so much, Bishop Hector, for being our moderator and our host, putting all this together. This Kingdom Conversation came as a result of some conversations that I was having with some of my colleagues in the Tampa Bay area. I am in St. Petersburg, Florida. Also had the opportunity to be in Clearwater and Tampa. They call it the Tampa Bay area. And I'm graced to be the spiritual leader of a diverse congregation, Today's Church. We have African Americans, Caucasians. We have people of all different ethnicities in our congregation. And I'm also blessed to serve as the president of Interfaith Tampa Bay, which is another diverse group, different religions, different orientations in the group, as well as the gathering of pastors. So among my colleagues, I just was, sitting around the table. We're at lunch, we're having different meetings, of course, doing the physical distance thing, and asking them what they thought about the Black Lives Matter movement. And my white colleagues, they were saying, yes, Black Lives Matter. And they were very passionate about it. They spoke with great power and authority about Black Lives Matter. And I just heard a little voice in my ear, I believe it was the voice of Spirit, to ask them the same question. Well, what about Black lives are equal? And what they thought about that. And I got a very different response. I saw people coughing and clearing their throat, requesting water, getting up and going to the bathroom, turning red, beet red. And I was taken aback because these are my people. These are people I fellowship with. These are people I work with in the community. These are people I work with in ministry. But it was something different about them saying Black lives are equal versus Black Lives Matter. And I don't believe these individuals are racist. I don't believe that they consider themselves people that discriminate or prejudice against African Americans, but they had challenges with actually saying Black lives were equal. And so from that, I continued the conversation with them and tried to help them and work with them on this idea of Black lives being equal. And we had a very deep conversation that it started with us being 3/5 of a person, that African Americans, that Blacks, Negroes were not considered to be a whole person, that when it came to the census and things that we were considered as slaves, we were 3/5 of a person. We were not a whole person. We were not equal to whites. And then I believe in the civil rights movement where the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and all those other civil rights leaders, I believe that we got another fifth where we got civil rights. We're able to live in certain neighborhoods and integration of schools. So we increased in our value as it was seen in the American society. But I don't believe that we've gotten to the place of the 5/5 where we're actually seen as equal. As I talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, I believe it is a powerful movement that says, do not kill us, that we have a right to live, we have a right to be treated like human beings, that we do not need to be killed in the streets by white police officers, that our lives matter, that our lives are important. And I've read the Black Lives Matter website. It's even so much more than Black Lives Matter. It's also about all lives matter. People of various orientations, people of other ethnicities other than Black are a part of this movement. Equal rights for women. It's a very broad movement. And as broad as the movement is, when people and my counterparts, or my white counterparts, say that Black Lives Matter, for somehow it's not translating that Black lives are equal. They're able to say matter a lot easier than they're able to say equal. And frankly, dogs and cats matter. They're pets. Pets matter. People fight for animal rights, that animals matter. Even in the time of slavery, the slaves mattered because we were a part of the economic portion of making money, and so we mattered. You know, the nanny mattered, the butler, the maid mattered, those that were picking cotton mattered. They mattered, but just because they mattered did not mean that they were equal. And so it's important to me that we don't lose the King movement of fighting for equality. I believe that just because we gained our civil rights, so we can sit wherever we desire and on a bus, and we can drive wherever we desire to drive, and we can go to the same hotels and schools and different things, does not mean that we're equal. I think we have increased in value, but I do not believe that in the eyes of people that we are really seen as equal. I think that even as African Americans, that a lot of us do not see ourselves as equal. That, you know, there are a lot of people that try to pass for white or wish they were white. And so I don't believe that people think that Black and white are actually equal. It's like, well, if I'm Black, I accept it, but that doesn't mean that I am equal. And so to see ourselves as African Americans, to know that we're made in the image and likeness of God. There's a part of God that looks like me. There's a part of God that looks like you. But when we get into the delineation, I think that's where people's issues come up and out to be healed, that Black lives are really equal. And so when we say Black lives matter versus Black lives are equal, it's looking at, is that enough? Do we stop at mattering? And is there more that needs to happen with us being equal? Do those things sound the same? They don't sound the same to me. They don't feel the same to me. And I don't get the same response. I don't get the same response when people say one versus the other. And so I believe that we have to continue the struggle. We have to continue the fight, to continue for our voices to be heard, to see ourselves as equal, and to speak that, to live that out, and to not settle for anything less than equal. So that's my heart. That's and I shared that with Bishop Hector. He put this wonderful format together to have these kingdom conversations, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have people and all over to get their feedback on what this is my thought, this is my feeling, this is my idea. I think it's a good start, but we can't stop there. We got to keep moving until we are equal financially, equal in every way, that we are equal and not just mattering.
All right. Well, listen, that was a lot to say, and that was a lot to think about as well. And so we have some friends with us here on tonight, some people who matter and are equal. We have with us Dr. Gina Jones from the Tampa Bay area in Florida. We have with us Bishop Dr. Kenyatta Arnett here in the Baltimore, Maryland area. And we've got Reverend Cherie Thompson in California. So we've got them from all over. And I'm so glad that y'all are with me on tonight, because, you know, even through promoting this Kingdom Conversation, I've been getting feedback just from the flyer. Bishop Hector, you made a mistake and put verses. Typo. Listen, I paid to have that flyer. Do you think I paid for a typo? Bishop Hector, you're not supposed to say verses, you're supposed to say, but that was good, because, just from that 2-letter verses, conversation was already gearing up. And so I said, so listen, I need you to be on the thread Monday night and give voice to that. But to get us going with this, Black Lives Matter versus Black Lives are equal. Dr. Pulley, thank you for getting that ball rolling. Reverend Cherie, what are your thoughts about that on tonight?
Oh gosh, I went all over the place with this. As I sat with it, the verses got to me as well. And instead of my first point of view about it was that it breeds a level of divisiveness. Like, it's about that there's a competitiveness in these two ideas. And where I landed after I thought about it some more was that the two ideas are just stages of consciousness. That there is a space where we just have to understand that I have not been valuing myself, and it's been reflecting in my life, world, and affairs. And I think that that's a collective thought that We all got to just really kind of sit with and own that there's some aspect of us, whether it's, I may think that I am absolutely here and I matter and I'm equal. But when I look at my brothers and sisters who are dealing dope, or I look at my brothers and sisters who are in gangs, that am I looking at them and thinking that their lives matter? Am I looking at them and seeing them in their wholeness? And so I think collectively we have to affirm that we matter. We had to affirm that these lives, no matter how they're showing up in the world right now, that they are vital, they're important. And I think that that's a first phase, right? So first is just to wake up. And then I think what we're waking up to is the idea of wholeness. We're waking up to the idea, because I don't see it necessarily as are they equal. I think it's understanding the wholeness and the oneness. And so the idea of that Black lives are equal to white lives already creates a premise to me that's not necessarily based on the absolute truth, which is that we are one. And so we're trying to remember that oneness. And I believe that those two are roads those are states of consciousness on the way to oneness.
Right. Bishop Kenyatta, weigh in with us tonight. What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, there was a lot to unpack in what Dr. Pulley just shared, and also what Reverend Thompson just shared. There's a lot to unpack, but I would dare say I agree wholeheartedly about the consciousness, because I think we can consider things to matter. In other words, we just think when something matters, we're considering it. But to say that something is equal, for those who think that they are better than, it means they have to now think themselves to be lower than what they are. So to say that we're equal, and I think that's where the challenge comes in, where Bishop was saying they were okay saying Black Lives Matter. But then when I say Black lives are equal, to say that someone is equal and I have been taught that I'm better than and I'm greater than and I'm above, now I have to think of myself as less than so that you can rise up and be equal with me. And I think that is where the greater challenge comes in. People have to think themselves. Bible says, don't think of yourself to be more than you are, because you don't deceive anybody but yourself. And so I think that is where the greatest challenge is. I can see that you matter. I'm considering you for your position, for your vocation, for the skill that you bring, for the talent that you have. You do matter. As you mentioned earlier, because you're part of the economic system. So you do matter, because we need you to flip the burgers. We need you to be the essential worker at the grocery store. That's why we don't mind them being out there in the COVID pandemic, because we need you to ring up the cashiers, be the cashier and ring up the cash register. But you're not equal, so you don't benefit from the same things that I benefit from, because I'm still above you. And I think that's where the challenge comes. They have to see themselves as lower than in order to see us as equal than.
Wow. Okay. Dr. Davina.
You're muted, sister.
I was a little slow with the unmute.
Just stay unmuted so we can hear you.
Just stay unmuted.
Just stay unmuted.
You're worth the wait, because Dr. Pulley gonna stay unmuted, because he's sitting on ready. He's sitting on ready.
I know he is.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in the dialogue. Thank you, Dr. Pulley, for listening to that whisper in your ear to ask that question. I mean, that was so keen to be in that very moment and hear and then respond to what you heard and to see that reaction. And again, thank you, Bishop Hector, for then establishing this particular platform. And again, also thank you to all of my other friends that I just met, Reverend Cherie and Bishop Arnett. So I have an affinity for these conversations about race as it relates to spirituality, because I am a true fan of Dr. King, and not just because of this beautiful speech called I Have a Dream, but 20 years ago when I had to submit my dissertation, I chose to look at race in the church because of something that Dr. King said, because of a number of things, but this became my anchor. And that is that he spoke to a religious conference in Chicago, I think it was around 1961. And he very, I think, profoundly said that we have to do this work with legislation. Like we have to do, you know, we have to march and we have to make petitions and so forth because the law needs to change. And so he didn't back away from the legislative work that he was doing. He thought it was important. But then he goes on to tell this delegation of religious individuals, religious leaders from all different faiths, that his work with legislation would only remove the physical barriers. That's what he said. It's only going to be physical. So we can physically sit on the bus because we matter. Right. So we can physically sit on the bus. We can physically drink water. So it's going to remove the physical barriers. We can even come to the college together. Physically, I can show up in this place. So he thought that legislative work was important because it dealt with the physical aspect of our lives. But he told this group of delegates that the true issue was not physical. The true issue is spiritual. That's and right. He charged that faith-based institutions had a responsibility and was the entity to address the matter. And then he went on to say, but faith-based institutions cannot address the matter because you're the most segregated hour in America. And so that's where that phrase came from, that particular speech. And so that really moved me. And so even though I have these discussions about diversity, racism, and all of this stuff in academia and so forth, I'm really, really moved to make sure that we're having this within faith-based gatherings. And that's why I am so delighted that Dr. Pulley was in that room with those faith leaders, hearing that question, hearing that one word, and then asking them and challenging them, because this takes us right back to what Dr. King was saying. And so to then hear those faith leaders to know that they struggled, they turned red and had to get water because of that one word, equality. It goes back to what he was saying. And I don't think it means that Dr. King's work was in vain, because we can sit on the bus. You know, I can go to Walmart and Target right now and go to the restroom. I'm working at the college. So his work was not in vain, but he also left us keys for what was ahead. And a part of that ahead is now. And so yes, I think it is essential that we remain open to our vocabulary and how we see how we see what we need to do and how we need to label it. And so when you use the word equality, I think it does go back to the root issues. And so, and it's not a new issue. I think we've been dealing with, I think mankind, humanity has been dealing with, you know, how we see each other. The fact that we see in history that there are times when we just don't even see the other person as human.
That's right.
We just don't even though in our Constitution it says all men are created equal. But the reason why you can enslave people, breed them like horses, is because you don't even see them as human. So so even though they said all men are equal, who do you count as men? Who do you count in humanity? And so for some time, we've not been counting each other as human. And I think at the base of that is the spiritual work that Dr. King was talking about. And that we do need to challenge how we're seeing each other. And so at the root of that, how we see each other, it's really a fear. You know, I know we talk a lot of times in our spiritual communities about fear and love, and this is no different. This is really the fear that a person has about themselves because they don't feel like they measure. They really don't feel like they measure up as a person. So in order for me to feel like I measure up as a person, I got to make you feel small so I can feel big. And so this energy that we call racism is the same energy that feeds domestic violence, because I'm not really sure if I measure up. You know, I got to do everything I can to make you feel little as my spouse. And statistically, we know that's a male-female dynamic or what have you, but it could be otherwise. And so it's the same energy that's sitting there at the root of equality. The fact that what's really happening is I don't feel human. I don't even feel worthy. I don't even feel divine. And because I don't feel divine, I have a difficult problem seeing you as divine, because I really don't see myself as divine. So I fake it. I base my worth on my zip code. I heard the term whiteness last week. It's a term that's been floating around in the academy for some time. I don't know who coined the term, but it's existing. And so we've been talking about whiteness for a while now. And so when we don't know who we are, we live by whiteness, you know, my zip code, what kind of car I drive, the kind of church I go to. And so we build our identity on these things. And so if you don't match that, I have a difficult time seeing you as me, have a difficult time seeing you as equal. And so in the different workshops that I do, you know, diversity workshops and so forth, I do think it's important that we have these conversations. I do think it's important that we highlight and help to encourage and influence a shift in our thinking from matter. I bless the Black Lives Matter movement because I think it birthed an opportunity for us to have the discussion, but it doesn't mean we can't lift it. And so I see us saying Black lives equal. I see us lifting the conversation in a way that gets even deeper to the root of it. And so, yes, it's important to have these conversations. They're not in vain. The discussions are not in vain. The workshops are not in vain. But as we do the workshops, I think we got to do the legislative work and the spiritual work. And this is a huge part of the spiritual work. So in this work, I think it's important that we continue to encourage individuals about how they see themselves, Black or white. And I've spent time talking about the fact that Black people are not seeing themselves as worthy and so on and so forth. But those that perpetuate this, they're not seeing themselves as worthy. And so we've got to do that work. And the last thing I'll say is, not only is this going to the root of how an individual does not see him or herself divine, you know, it leads me to the whole concept of the pro-life movement. It's hypocrisy, because when we say pro-life, you know, we're just talking about 9 months. We need to say, you need just to tell the truth. You're pro 9 months. Because once somebody shows up after 9 months, you don't even count them as equal. So you're not pro-life, you are pro 9 months. So Black lives equal, you know, and we need to challenge this pro-life. Stop running around here, you know, thinking you're so righteous because you protecting the babies. You protect 9 months. That's it. People got a whole life to live, and you protecting 9 months. So that ain't pro-life. That's pro 9 months. So there's a lot of work that in this area. I said that was the last thing. But I'm gonna say one more thing. One more.
You're here
when we
for a
talk
reason.
about people not knowing. When we talk about people and white people not knowing that they have an issue, that is not true. They know, but they don't want to be accountable for knowing. It's the same thing that happens when you have a mother and the child grows up to say, I was molested. And we see Dr. Phil and we see, you know, Ayala and different ones saying, you mean you didn't know that your child was being molested? There are signs there. You know something's going on, but you don't want to be accountable because you haven't resolved your own issues. And so, so there's a lot of room for us to carry these conversations forward. And I'm done.
No, it's all good, and it's all good. I'm able to mute as I need to mute, and so that's phenomenal. And I heard you say that you bless the Black Lives Movement, and that, you know, from that these conversations are birthed from that. So then, Bishop Kenyatta, so then for you, Black Lives Matter insufficient, and so therefore that's not enough. We need Black lives are equal, or Black Lives Matter, and it's the road to progression to going further?
I dare say we need both. I don't think we should really divorce the two. When it comes to the matter issue, I believe the greatest challenge is for us to start mattering to one another. It's hard to expect other people to see you with value or worth when you don't show your own value. You don't see your own value, as was just stated, when you're not seeing your own divinity, your own worthiness. You don't see how much you matter to yourself. It's kind of hard to expect other people to say that you matter when you don't matter to yourself. When we're not mattering in our own communities, when we're not showing up at the polls, when we're not showing up at school board meetings, when we're not showing up for simple things like parent-teacher conferences. We let them make the decisions for our children, because what we're really saying is, I don't matter. It doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter what I think. You just go ahead and decide. You do it. You put my child classified in 504, SST, and all the other stuff. It doesn't matter what I think. And so we have to start mattering and showing up. Part of mattering is you have to show up. You have to not only show up, but you have to speak up. And so I don't think we can divorce mattering and equality, because in our mattering, we also have to demand our equality. But we can't expect them to give us equality if we are not showing that we matter to ourselves. So it's one of those double-edged swords. If we got to do both. We have to do both. So I'm like you. I appreciate the all of the Black Lives Matter movement. I wholeheartedly agree with it. But I want some of us to take, let it get into our consciousness, get it in that spirituality piece that Dr. Jones just brought up. That spirituality piece is so missing because when I think we separate the physical from the spiritual too often, and the two can't be divorced all the time. And we're trying to meet some physical needs, but we're not getting to those spiritual needs at the same time. And so we have to remember that we do matter. And in that, then we can get to those legislative pieces to make them give us equality. But right now, we're not mattering to ourselves. How we mattering to ourselves when we're doing more crime and harm to our own neighborhoods, to our own selves, to our own children, disservice to our own. So we got to show them that we do matter in order to expect them to give us some consideration. Yes, sir.
So it sounds like, okay, and we'll use that. We've got that buzzword tonight, consciousness going on. Thank you for that, Reverend Sharif, for throwing that out into the universe. Let's capture it and let's run with the concept of consciousness. So are we suggesting then that we're putting the cart before the horse? And by that, I'm saying, is the cart before the horse if we're expecting other cultures, other races to see us as equal if we ourselves don't see starting with us as equal? Reverend Sri, is that kind of what you were suggesting there?
See, I really work on, I'm a lover, and at my core, I'm here for oneness. And so I have to measure everything I say against that ideal, because that's what I reach for. And so when I start talking about how we need to do something different than them, I'm already off my premise because I have divided us. And I'm trying to find a way for us to play better together. Now, playing better together is an amazing goal. Like, we want to stop. We don't want people warring with one another. That's a great goal. But I try to think about it as, don't get caught and just play well together. Don't get caught and let's live well together. Or let's just live apart and not bother one another. Whatever that looks like for what you like. It's to say that to truly be in a space of oneness, I stop thinking about you over there and me over here. I stopped thinking like I got to work from that premise, and then I can start to address these other issues because I'm coming from the same premise. And I believe that movements like Black Lives Matter. One of the things a really good dear member of ours, Patty Henley, was in Operation Breadbasket, very much a part of the civil rights movement. And one of the things that she mentioned about this current movement, and she says, those ministers prayed together. And there was a spiritual component that was ingrained in that movement. And I feel like that's what actually has me really excited about this conversation, is that we're all finding our divine assignment in it. Mm-hmm. And it's not the assignment of the people leading the movement to be the spiritual energy behind it, because that's not that, they're part of the assignment. It's our responsibility to hold the vision, to communicate the vision, to amplify the vision of oneness, right? All right. And so they may be talking about changing policy, or there's someone, where the people, I went on a protest march, there are people handing me water, giving me, you need a snack, sister? I'm like, she just fulfilled a divine purpose, because I had not thought about bringing water with me. And that helped to fuel me on the journey, so that I was able to hold the consciousness I needed to hold for my reason for being there. So I think that there's the idea of consciousness it's a complex word that means a very simple thing, which is, what are you aware of? What is the totality of your awareness? I work to come from a premise of oneness, of wholeness, of love. I believe that's what the Wayshore was trying to give us. And so I try to bring my words back to that. And I have to work at it because out here, we got a lot of words to divide us up. And I guess that makes some sense. I mean, if I'm baking a cake, everything isn't sugar, something's flour and something is an egg. And all of that's going to bake this cake together. So I know we have to identify our cultures and be able to identify that part. But I try to remember my premise and to be aware of my divine assignment in this is to hold the awareness of oneness. And if I'm doing that and communicating from that, I'm fulfilling my purpose, and I'm still listening for the next assignment.
Dr. Pulley, it sounds like one water, one plants, another waters. Does that align itself with matter versus equal, or where do you stand?
I feel like, and I have to say this, I feel like that matter is not a forward movement. I feel like it's a backwards movement. I feel like we were talking in the civil rights movement, we were talking about civil rights, we were talking about equal rights, we were talking about sitting at the table of brotherhood and sisterhood together, and people being not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I think we were at equality and we watered it down to matter. I feel like that, I don't know that I think we were already at equality and we got comfortable there, and we stopped fighting and stopped moving forward. I'm talking about fighting erroneous ideas and limiting beliefs and faulty perception. I think we got comfortable with some of the physical things that Dr. Jones talked about, and we didn't keep with the idea. And so things happen, things come up and have to be healed. So we see, disparity, and we see killing, and we see all these things that say, hello, you forgot who you were, you forgot what you were doing. And so for me, it doesn't feel like it's another step. It almost feels to me like a backward step to just don't kill us and let us live. And I don't think people are aware of the totality of what this idea is just from the words of it. So I think that we gotta know that some people are there, and let's bring them along and let's keep moving forward together. But I don't see it as one plants, another waters, and now God's gonna give the increase. I feel like we already were talking equality, and then we settled and almost like dummied down for matter. Okay, well, if I can't get equality, then at least let me matter. And I think that there's something to be said that we gotta keep moving forward. Dr. King was talking about equality. He wasn't talking about matter. And I feel like that, I don't know that that's a progression. It feels to me almost like a backward step.
Dr. Pulley, I see it as an alarm. Like, it's kind of like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, our lives matter. Like I felt like it was just, and the reason I see it as an alarm is because look what happened after the alarm was rang. Like when an alarm goes off, things start to happen. Energy, people come to deal with the alarm. And what we have to do is not cut the alarm off prematurely, because I think that we're not finished hearing what it came to tell us, what it came to reveal to us, what fire are we supposed to be putting out. And so I think that that's like, when I think about that it's not necessarily like it's the alarm, and it's here to signal to us that we may be off course with where we were going with this thing, because look at what's showing up in our experiences. Like, we're seeing more and more divisiveness, but we're placated because we can have those physical freedoms that Dr. Jones talked about, that we can say, I can go to, look, not only am I at the school, I got a good job here. I'm the chief of this or the head of that. And so if on the surface, it's like, see how much, look, we had a Black president. So it's like, we can feel this sense, but I feel like there's this alarm that went off, and it's been going off, just not getting our attention. But this one got our attention, and that's why I praise it, because it got our attention. And now we're like, wait. And then we take it higher. Now that we get what there's an alarm, I can cut it off and address the issue now.
I think this time it grabbed the attention of not just us, but now it has grabbed the attention of others, because the alarm went off several years ago with previous situations. And not many people heard the alarm, or they ignored the fire alarm. The people that ignore the fire alarm, is the batteries are going dead. and it was just making noise.
Yes.
You know, the battery's going dead. We heard that story before. We heard it before. We heard with Rodney King, y'all ride it, okay.
Yeah.
But then we give you something, we pacify you with something. And I think that's our danger, is we get comfortable. They'll pacify with some kind of legislation, some kind of temporary hold, pacify, and then we say, okay, well, we got made up. We're good. But this time, thanks be to God for social media that put this incident in the eyes and in the hands of people around the world. So it wasn't just a local issue. It wasn't just a Ferguson issue this time. This was something that resounded around the world, live on the internet, and everybody was watching. And so now you can't hide. You can't say it was just something local in a small town in one little simple state in the United States. Everybody around the world is seeing the evils that we've been hiding. And social media has just brought some exposure to the demons that we've been covering, the elephant in the room, everybody had the crazy relative and we just put them upstairs when the guests come over. But now our crazy has become a world news. It's not fake news now. It has become world news because everybody was watching. So this time it was a global alarm that went up. I agree, it was an alarm. But now our problem is, our challenge is not to let the alarm go off and then us get satisfied and go back into our complacency and say, okay, they gave us this stimulus check. They done gave me a little $1,200 stimulus check. I'm good now. No, baby, it's not over yet. It's not over yet. It's just now starting. And I think that's our danger. We get into the valley of complacency and we get comfortable staying there. And then we find ourselves wandering in the wilderness, going around that mountain, going nowhere. And eventually God's gonna say, enough is enough. I didn't see y'all going in circles for too long. Change your direction, do something different.
And I think it was the combination of COVID-19 and the incident, because people were more home, as opposed to out and about. I think the COVID also worked together. As the scripture says, all things work together for the good. So it's like people are on their phones, they're on social media more because we were all quarantined with the virus. So it's like you couldn't pretend you didn't see it because everybody's sitting home watching.
Everybody in the house.
And then I think the distractions went away too. Like, I can't remember what cartoon it was, but it was like, where the person would shout ball and the person would look over there. I feel like there's like a shiny object. And so all the shiny objects kind of were gone. Yeah. The shiny object of your job, of getting kids to and from school, of, everything kind of slowed down. And so we got a chance to tune in. But let me tell you what, the world is opening back up because we decided we over COVID, like, I quit. And so people are back, so we can get distracted again. And that, to me, that's the part that I've definitely been holding in prayer. Is like, I don't think it's complacency. I don't think we get back and we're comfortable. I just think that we're so distracted, like our attention span is so short. And we're tired of talking about, racism. We're tired of talking about COVID. Like we're tired of talking about COVID. I don't want to hear another thing about a mask and a temperature, right? And it's like, not to get that we gotta endure for the long haul. Like this is going to be a challenge that we're going to have to work through. These uncomfortable conversations have to yield the shift that happens in these organizations. Like there's a long-term endurance. And so when people are talking about they're tired, I preached a sermon a few weeks ago talking, I ain't no ways tired. Like you've been practicing for this in everything that you do to be able to sustain an idea long enough to see it come into expression. We can't give up on the idea because it didn't come easy. We got to keep enduring in it. And so this is like, I'm here. We can call it matter. We can say Black Lives, whatever we want to put behind it. Let's just not get distracted from the idea that we're holding the vision for oneness and that we will insist upon it. Like we haven't insisted upon it enough recently. We keep going back to when it happened before and people made sacrifices in the past. But what are we willing to give up right now in order to hold the vision for a preferable future? And that's been the question in my soul, is what am I willing to give up right now? What comfort am I willing to release right now because I'm holding the vision in this space of being uncomfortable for something new to emerge? What am I willing to allow to be unsettled in my soul? These one-on-one conversations, people don't, having conversations with your coworkers who are of a different hue, and they don't know what to say and they don't know what to do, but they do feel hurt. They don't want to be disconnected from you. They want this to not end your relationship. And so you got to have these awkward conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the other side of that is then an ability to have a real dialogue. Like maybe now there was some things underneath that we weren't even talking about. And we can erode that and actually connect with one another heart to heart. Like there's just opportunity all over the place for us. And I just don't want us to get up. I don't want something else shiny to come up and distract us, because that's a tactic. And it's at play.
Let's pluck from the thread. So on the thread, we have the combustion theory. And so by that, I mean, this individual suggests that, beyond social media, this individual suggests that there was some form of media when the other injustices were shown. However, it was the combustion perhaps, or the infusion of both the pandemic of COVID-19 along with the recent injustices that really brought this thing into full fusion. Dr. Jones, talk about it. What do you think?
Well, certainly, I think all of these factors worked for the moment. They worked to support the alarm. I think the universe decided, that it's time for a major alarm, and so all of these things we can say, kind of conspired together so that this alarm could take place. And academically, we know the history and the power of media, so that while maybe there was not one said person that said, let's make sure that we get the required media attention so we can get people's attention. And so that individuals that are distracted, as Reverend Cherie said, we make it difficult for them to ignore it. So we know the history there. Dr. King was very specific and very planned and was very intentional about media. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Some people like to say, that he manipulated that in a negative way. He was very intentional about why people needed to see it, because people were distracted. People came home from Vietnam, at least the white soldiers did. They got the GI Bill after World War II. They were building houses. I mean, the 1950s and 60s looked great depending on what zip code you were in. And so when we saw those water holes on the children and so forth, and the dogs, it made it difficult for them to be distracted. But as we said, we then had the opportunity to get comfortable. But I want to go back to what Reverend Cherie was talking about, holding the consciousness of oneness. I think that it is long-term. I've been repeating, a dear friend of mine, Kenneth Butler Jr., who has been using this alliteration to say, life is the classroom, the Lord is the lesson, or life is the classroom, the Lord is the teacher, and love is the lesson. And I think that's eternal. And so holding the conscious of oneness is eternal. So we're in this moment, and we are figuring out our divine assignment in this moment. King did his work. Mm-hmm. I mean, we quote him because we get a chance to learn from his work. And the people before him did their work. Rosa did her work. King did his work. Mahalia Jackson did her work. Even Billy Graham, he did his work. The question is, we're here, what is our work? And a part of our work is to lift the consciousness of equality. The fact that we're still struggling, and we've made some gains, but we still have work to do about how we see each other. That's how you get a Hitler to have an experience like the Holocaust. That was an alarm, because people didn't want to believe it. Even in the United States, we didn't want to believe it. And it got to the point where we could no longer ignore that we had a child being molested. We could no longer ignore that. And so we had to give some account for that. So I do think holding the consciousness of oneness, it is long-term. And so I'm here for this term. So what is my divine assignment in this term? And so I like to pull on other, scholars and theologians and so forth, because they give us keys for now. And when we've transitioned and we finish our term, we will leave keys to help the next term. And so one of the persons that I love to pull on is Martin Buber. He's a German philosopher who has this, he built this, wrote about this communication theory called I thou. And he's saying the same thing that we're saying. Because we do not see ourselves as one. I don't see myself as one with you. I don't even see myself one with me. And then until we get to the point where we recognize that namaste, that when we recognize there's an I and a thou, and we're connected, and it's different from what we do is we still do I, it. That's what we're doing. We're still challenged with living out I, it. But he says we have to get to I, thou. And I, thou is that oneness that Reverend Cherie was talking about. It's how I see me. And when I see you, I see me. Mm-hmm. And when I look in the mirror, I see God. When I look in the mirror, I see God. When I look at you, I see God. We're one. And so we're yet building that. And I think we've gained some ground in that area, but we've got work to do. It's almost like school, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, and so on and so forth. So for this time, what is our assignment in holding that consciousness of oneness? And I think to focus on that word equality is essential because it's helping us to dig up that root. And for the individuals that say we keep talking about it too much, no. When we do marriage counsel, we don't tell the couples, y'all talk too much. If y'all gonna make it for 50 years, stop talking. Y'all talk too much about money. Y'all talk too much about intimacy. That's not what we tell married couples. We encourage them to talk more, and then we give them tools of how to talk about your money, how to talk about your sexual relations, how to talk about, what happened with your mom and what happened with your mom and what happened with your daddy and your dad. We give them tools, but we don't say y'all talking about it too much. We tell them you're not talking about it enough. We're not talking enough about our oneness. Mm-hmm. We're not talking enough about our oneness. And so these are the conversations that help us to very intentionally create platforms about oneness in that conversation and take it into all of our different spaces as a part of our divine assignment. So when I give you water, this one came from Costco, but they need to pay us if we don't say their name. So when I give you water, I'm acknowledging, I'm acknowledging you and I'm acknowledging me at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Someone on the thread does agree that we've perhaps lost the consciousness of oneness. They suggest, as I believe I've heard it here this evening, that beyond the civil rights movement with Dr. King, we have allowed ourselves to become complacent. Dr. Pulley, are we complacent?
I think that I like what Cherie said, Reverend Cherie said about get tired. The Bible says, be not weary in well-doing, for in due season we will reap if we faint not. I think we get tired. And it's important for us to be strategic, because I think what happens is that everybody tries to do the same thing at the same time. And so we don't have another group to switch out to. What I did like about the civil rights movement is that it was so strategic, is that once one set of people were moved out, and they beat them and spit on them and hose them, another group got right in and they were ready to assume the same position. And it was strategic. So I think that everybody cannot do the same thing at the same time. And I see as a spiritual leader, as a minister, as a clergy person, that sometimes my role may not be the protester and may not be the politician, but in these times I've had to stand between the protester and the politician so they could even hear each other, because they were so fueled with anger and rage with each other that they weren't even able to hear each other. And I was able to help them get to a compromise. Like, one of the things they wanted all of the protesters wanted all the police officers to lay on the ground and put their hands behind their back to show solidarity that they were with us. And the police officer, well, if everybody's laying on the ground with their hands behind their back, what if something goes off? Who's gonna protect us? And so then I was able to say, okay, well, can they do it one at a time? That each police officer that desires to do this, and they do it one at a time. And so that way the protesters get to see the police officers in solidarity, and the police officers get needed to do their job of protecting, but they couldn't hear each other because there was so much tension that was going on. Everybody, fighting for their position. And so I believe that we are to hold that consciousness of oneness, of unity, of equality, that idea and divine mind of universal oneness. I believe that's our role. I just feel like we have to specify it. I just feel like the generality of just we all one doesn't bring up people's stuff. So I often find myself saying that we are one regardless of our age, our race, our gender, our orientation, our socioeconomic status, our religion, our criminal background, our credit history, our family. And so when I start hitting all these points and start specifying this oneness, then whatever is in me that doesn't feel like we won or questions the oneness, it kind of comes up and out so it can be healed. But I think it's important that we specify these areas and delineate this oneness so that if there's anything in me that's not one or doesn't believe in that idea, it can become up and out and be healed. Okay, what else we got in that thread? Go ahead.
Say it again?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so all right, so that brings up a particular thought, and I heard Reverend Cherie talk about, she used the school setting in one of her thoughts, and I know we've got several educators on the line. Shout out for education.
Yes.
We, Dr. Foley, I heard you talk about the various, we're one, and you gave various categories, and we've been saying that silence is the wrong thing. Silence is complicit. Silence is is giving consent to these types of acts. Are we perhaps silent at the wrong time? And so, for example, when I think about the school setting, do we allow them to categorize us, and are we silent to it? So, for example, if I'm an African-American principal, or if I'm an African-American school teacher, then they see me having a certain worth or perhaps a certain equality. But for that African-American custodian, do we allow them to walk past that custodian and not even speak, and then we don't even open our mouths as well? Or when they say to us, for example, Mr. Arnett or Dr. Jones, but they pass the custodian and they say, hey, Daquan, or, hey, Jim, is it not as important for him to be Mr. Jones or Mr. Johnson? Bishop Kenyatta, what are your thoughts about that, perhaps?
I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen where we minimize people because of their positions. And that is a dangerous thing, because even in our oneness, we also have to realize that we're still different. The Bible says we're many members in one body, but we don't all have the same function. And so in that, I have to respect you for being the professor. I have to be respectful of you as the bishop, and you as Bishop Giggles, and this as the preacher. We have to respect each other in our own various areas, but we all still deserve the same common respect. And you're right, in the public school system, we see that all the time, where where people will call the custodians or the cafeteria staff by their first name. But then they'll come to me and it's Dr. Arnett. Or I worked in a school where I was one of 4 Black teachers. And the challenge was, well, why do we have to call you Dr. Arnett? Well, because that's the title that I earned the degree. But why can't we just call you by your first name? What is it, Ken? No, my name is Kenyatta, but you can call me Dr. Arnett. And it took one of my students. In fact, it was a Black assistant principal who refused to call me Dr. Arnett. And it was one of my Black students who went to him and said, that's Dr. Arnett, not Mr. Arnett. He said, well, does it matter? She said, well, you called the Spanish teacher Dr. Hoya, why you can't call him Dr. Arnett? And he got convicted on the spot, but it was my student that said it, because the student was realizing the differences that were going around the building. And so there we go with that consciousness thing again, because students were becoming more aware of the differences in how we were treating people. And it's a dangerous thing, but it happens so often. It happens so often. She's Miss Gladys, but this is Miss Johnson, and so we have to be careful of that we still owe I remember my grandmother say, you put a handle on somebody's name. You always got to put, depending on when you were born, you had to put a handle on somebody's name. You had to put a handle on it. And it was Mr. Jones, Miss Johnson, but we were never on first name basis with anyone who was an adult or in those settings. And so we still have to be aware.
The bishop, doctor. I might be, honestly, I've been in LA a long time. And it's ruined me for being in the South, being back East, because everybody, I mean, it will be like literal schools where the children are calling, that's Miss Jill, or that's Miss, like by their first names. And that was, or sometimes not Miss, just calling them by their first name. And that was the accepted thing at the school. So LA is a little different. Like California is a little different in that respect. And so, but what
y'all
has afforded me?
Y'all not separating from this country. Y'all not going to do
listen.
We're not allowing that.
Let me tell you this about California. There's some things that were stripped away that gave you just a sense of like, what's it like to not have to deal with that, right? So the titles are one of those things, but what it gave me was the opportunity to connect with people that I could feel a need from. So I don't go around talking to, saying hi. When I went to college, it was, you say hi to the Black people on the walk. Like we acknowledge each other because we were at a predominantly white institution. And that was almost a rule. And if you didn't, it'd be like, so-and-so never speaks to people. But being out here with that not necessarily being an issue, because we are, flower children every now and then, it gave me the sense of I can feel when someone needs to be acknowledged. And so it's not so much about the level of where your work is, because let me tell you what, let the person that cleans your building not show up for a month. And then you'll see how important that is, right? Like so some of these,
because he matters.
Right, some of the, but listen, out here it's not Black people cleaning the buildings. I told you I'm in California. But the value that we place on things, sometimes because I have worked so hard to get to where I am, I have made my work the thing I worship to. And so it's like, because I made it to this level, now I look down upon people who may not have made it there, and not in a you're not enough kind of way, but in a you better call me this kind of way. And I'm thinking, Reverend Mary Tumpkin, when we first learned, yes. I went to seminary with Reverend Mary Tumpkin as my teacher. And one of the things she talked about was the title Reverend. And that there are some of these titles that we take on like their doctor, which is different than Reverend. Meaning that it is not the title you call yourself. It's the idea of being revered by the people, meaning the level I am in my spiritual space. And so we have to, these labels are, again, methods to divide. And it's like, I want to make sure that I'm always looking at the monuments we build to divide and being intentional about it. So I know the work it takes to get to something, and I'm acknowledging that work, but it's not you. You are whole, perfect, and complete, whether you got a degree or not. So I don't have, so I try to stay in that mindset. Go ahead, Dr. Davina Jones.
All the way up, right? Like you felt that all the way in California, didn't you?
I think a deeper issue is, there's a reason why I call my mother and I call her mom. I'm honoring an energy that she is bringing to me. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason why I call my dad. And I know there are some people that call their parents by their first names, but I call my mom for a reason. And I call my dad for a reason. And I'm not doing that because I think they're better than me. I'm not doing that because I think my mom is better than me. I'm doing it to honor and something that she's bringing to me. And I think I think beyond titles and so forth is the fact that we've just not we've not always been our highest and our best at simply esteeming your presence. Mm-hmm. Period. Now I will say I don't spend a lot of time debating my title because I just tell you my name is Dr. Jones. And so the last person that asked me, well, what do you want me to call? I didn't answer Bishop Hector earlier, but I was at a meeting about 2 months ago and they say, so what do we call you? Davina, Dr. Davina? I said, well, what did you ask the president Dr. Beard, did you ask him? And so my point was kind of like, my point was like what Dr. Arnett said. You thought of him enough to even ask him. You didn't even think of me, and you didn't even ask him because you just assumed value to him.
That's right.
But you wanted me to negotiate my presence. You didn't ask him. Right. You see, so I'm serious. And when you ask all of these other male professors,
look at them. Right. Look at them. Look at them. Get a good look.
Right. When you ask them to negotiate, then I negotiate. Other than that, you're so.
They call me Dr. Jones.
Yeah. If that's what we call it.
Okay, so let's pause right now.
But I desire to emphasize that the only reason why we're even having that conversation is because we've just simply neglected to honor each other. Because when we honor each other, I don't have a problem saying mom, dad, bishop, doctor, miss, mister. I actually think there's a lot of false sense of humility when I come into contact with people that say, just call me Amy, you know, because when I really get down to the end of the road, I get a chance to see how Amy really thinks about herself and what she thinks about me. So the only reason why we even have these conversations about title is because from day one, we've not done the I, thou work.
Yeah.
We've stepped out of the oneness consciousness. But when we're operating in simply, oneness, I don't have a problem saying mom. I don't have a problem saying dad. I don't have a problem saying bishop. I don't have a problem saying reverend, because I'm only honoring that extra little gift that you're bringing into my presence. Be it a janitor, a secretary. When I walk into my classroom, I say, hi, beautiful. I call everybody beautiful. I find a term of endearment to call everybody. And I often say, one day I went into the classroom because I was rushing trying to get stuff on the board because we got to get through this curriculum. And the student stopped me and said, you didn't say hi, beautiful people.
Because they look for that valid.
They started looking for it. They started looking for it.
Yes,
so the only reason why we're negotiating things like that is simply because, we're dishonoring ourselves and each other. So the more we do that, we don't even have to negotiate all that. You can say mom, dad, Dr. Reverend, whoever, Bishop so-and-so. But just
Bishop, what got on that thread?
I've been in California too long. I told y'all that in the beginning.
So
what they said on that
they got issues in California. Don't get distracted.
Oh, listen.
Don't be deceived.
Don't be deceived.
According to the thread, the new tweet, I'll use Dr. Pulley's terms, the new tweetable, Instagrammable, social mediable that's out there in the universe is we have neglected to honor each other, coined by Dr. Davina Jones. So the question becomes, and perhaps you may agree, you may not agree, and there's some heat on the thread regarding it. Culturally, even in my experience, I find, Dr. Jones coined it as false humility. I can get with that. I do find that culturally, it seems to be the PhD, the doctorate, the title of such, perceivably is more important to people of color than Caucasian or white Americans, who will say, oh no, yes, I'm Dr. But just call me Jim, just call me Amy. In the vein of equality, do we think that there is
They don't mean that.
They don't mean it.
Again, I tapped it, humility. Is there a reason why it is perceivably more important to people of color than white Republicans?
I'm gonna say yes. I'm gonna say yes. It's very important because I was not going to get a doctorate degree, but my grandmother, Dr. Lanita Brown, was like, "You will be a doctor, and I will pay for it, and I will ensure that you become a doctor." She says, "And when you become a doctor, they are to call you Dr. Pulley." And I'm like, "Well, why do I need to be Dr. Pulley?" She said, "Because other Blacks, they didn't have Black and brown at that point, but she was saying because other Black boys and girls need to see someone that looks like them that is a doctor so that they can know that they too can be doctors."
That's right.
And so that they can say, "I know personally somebody who is a doctor," and if they desire to aspire to that, that they can connect with that, as opposed to just call me Darrell or Pookie. You know, she said, you need to lift our people up so that they know that they can be doctors if that's what they desire to be. So I believe it does have a different sense if you come from 3/5 to be doctor as opposed to you was always 5/5. You know, I done came from 3/5 to 4/5, and I'm working on my 5/5 in America. You know, I think it does mean something.
And I agree absolutely, because my great grandmother, she wasn't able to access this path in the same way that I did. You know, I hear the stories of her being called Gal. Mary McLeod Bethune, who founded Bethune-Cookman College, now Bethune-Cookman University, I'm told through one of the historians that although we often refer to her now as Dr. Bethune, she was very intentional about being addressed as Mrs. Bethune, because Black women weren't even called Mrs. at the time. Wow. That's why I said we just been dishonoring each other. You know, and the reason why I say there's false humility when my white colleagues say, just call me Bob, because let one of them sons get arrested. Let one of their kids on the ground with a knee on the neck. They're going to come and tell you, I work for the DA, my husband is the judge, my brother is
and I am Dr. So-and-so.
They're gonna pull out second lieutenant. They was Bob yesterday, but today they second lieutenant, they judge. Y'all hear my blackness coming out? They second lieutenant, they judge so-and-so. They daddy was the mayor. They're gonna pull out every title that they can think of if their son is in the middle of the street with somebody's knee on their neck. That's why I say it's false humility.
That's right.
I'm Bob today, but tomorrow, if you got my son on the ground with a knee on the neck, I'm coming after you with every title I got.
You ever been around some of those people, like these people who walk into a room and immediately something changes in the room? Like you look up and it's like, who is that? Right? That their energy, their consciousness just kind of precedes them, and it exalts the room, and so you revere them in that space. Not that I look to be that person, but I think about the name doesn't matter if your energy is reflecting who you know yourself to be. And so I have, now mind you, and I'm saying all this and just to be serious, in case my mom happens to fiddle upon this video, that I use my niceties. I know how to use my terms of respect. I'm over here, ma'am and sirring, Mom, I'm ma'am and sirring. But the reality is that I guess it's like, do I have to tell you who I am, or is my presence going before me, right? Making that, like, not so much making it known to exalt me, but is that love going out when people walk into the room? They're like, something good just happened. Like there's an energy that just happened here. And when they see me, do they really see who I am beyond whatever title I may be holding or not holding? And so when I talk about coming from the premise, what premise am I coming from? Coming from the space of oneness, I always have to check some of those first thoughts that pop up that are divisive thoughts, because I've been programmed to be divisive. I've been programmed to feel separate. And so I have to continue, like I'm here to have my mind transformed. So I got to remember that I'm constantly transforming my mind by inspecting my thoughts to say that this hit the divine measure, does this hit the divine standard that I really truly believe for me and everybody else. So I'm checking myself constantly on stuff like that. And, you know, it's nothing to me to, because I can respect the work it takes to do whatever it is you do. So if there's a title that you like, tell me what it is. Tell me what it is, and I'm gonna do my best to subdue this California in me, and not call you by your first name, because to me that breaks through and gets us to love. Like so sometimes the titles divide me from that feeling of I appreciate you, and I'm seeing you and what you did, what you've done. And I know where this is birthed from. It just hit me that out here in the entertainment industry, oftentimes you're talking to people and you got their full eye contact until they figure out what you do. And so if what you do is something that could help them, they're all in. But if they can't, you will see them start to look for the next person that they want to speak to. And so,
I guess
go ahead.
I was going to say, I guess a part of what I'm saying is that we don't have to let those titles distract. You know, the titles, I mean, if you go to the military, it's just going to be some titles.
That's where I was going to go.
It's just it.
Yeah.
If we just honor each other's presence, the title is okay. We're talking about titles, but the title is not the issue. The issue is how are we honoring? Are we showing up with the consciousness of oneness? So when I walk into my classroom and I say, hi, beautiful people, you know, we can do all kinds of titles in that room because we have honored each other. So, and I have all ages I have people that are older than me, people younger than me. I've got folks that have served in the military I've got law enforcement taking my classes. So I've got all these people, and we all come with different roles and different titles, which are cool to me because it helps us to just signal the gift that we're bringing in the room. But before you know that gift, my presence is a gift. And when I understand that my presence is a gift and I recognize that's why, when I'm just walking by people, it's good to say, hi. That's it.
I see you.
Hi.
Yeah.
I just walked by you in the grocery store while I was picking up my flour. I'm getting my flowers. So I go home and fry my chicken. Hi. I have honored your presence.
That's right.
You see? Yes, and so that's what I'm saying. At the root of this is what you were talking about, oneness. So the title is all the titles can be there if we are honoring. We get distracted by the titles because we're not honoring each other.
That's right. And I think it depends on the platform, as you said, the platform or the circumstances, because if you're in a setting where we're all on first name basis, that's one thing. But if we're in a setting where we're honoring certain people's titles, but then we look down on others, and then you're just Cherie and you're Davina, but this is doctor and doctor because we're males and you're only going to call us by our titles, I think that's where I have a problem, because that is what people do. And again, I served in the military. So in the military, you just get into the habit of everybody is a title and everybody's a last name. We never use first name. Only time you use first name was when you were in the dormitory or some relaxed environment. But when it came to that professional setting where we were in uniform, everyone is a title and a last name, and we can go back even further to my grandmother was one of those who despised that term gal, as Dr. Jones mentioned that. Now, you want to see that woman, well, the Holy Ghost would leave her and something else would come out of her if you call her a gal. And it goes back to her rearing in Beaumont, Texas, a very segregated city in Texas in the 30s, where you were called gal because it was to demean you as a Black woman. And so she didn't play that term. And then we have the people, I hate calling names and stuff, but slave masters, they were first name basis. They were Charlie to Charlie. But what did the slave have to call him? You had to call him Mr. Charlie. Because again, it goes back to our matter versus the equal state, because they didn't see, you mattered because you worked on their plantation, but you were not equal with them to be on a first name basis with them. So we're Davina and Kenyatta, but to you, that's Bishop and Doctor. Because you are not on the same level playing field with us. And so again, if it's a setting where everybody's on a first name basis, I think that is, since you're in California and everybody's on first name basis, then you're okay. But if they're calling you Cherie, but then you're required or expected to call the other people in your office by their title, then there's a problem.
Yeah, it's that the equality thing is huge. And I think that's, like, to be perceptive of it, and and then to check on what it does for you, right? Because I always think that it's like, if them not using that title made me feel a certain way, then that gives me a chance to check myself, because I don't need you to affirm who I am. Like, that doesn't define me. And so these kind of consciousness raising conversations help me to look at how can I identify with the people who are having the identity crises right now. And to be able to say, okay, so you've forgotten who you are so much. Like, you're such in that level of forgetfulness that you can't see that you have divided yourself completely and that you needed to pedestal yourself in order to feel like your whole self. Like that. So I try to have some compassion around that, because it helps me to relate to people, to see that, when I call the president of the United States a child of God, when I call him Christ in expression, and people look at me like I'm crazy, it's because I'm trying to relate to the part of him I can relate to.
Yes.
Right. So I may not be able to relate to the choices that you're making and the way that you're thinking, but I can relate to you spiritually, and I can call forth what I know to be true about you. And so that part gets me to be able to crack open to that space of going to the rising of that we're equal, that there is a sameness, a oneness about us. And Reverend Della Reese, who's my mentor, would often call people, like, she had this whole mantra where she would say, Christ, now say your name. And that was like, Christ Cherie? Like, that just felt like the world was getting ready to crash around me. But she's like, you know, if you can't speak who you are, then how will you be able to recognize who you are as you move throughout your world? So I think that this type of recognition conversation, idea about the titles and all of that goes back to, like, if I know who I am, it's going to change the way that Black Lives Matter resonates with me. Mm-hmm. It's going to change the way that Black Lives Are Equal resonates with me, because I'm coming from a premise of knowing who I am. And I want us to keep exploring and expanding our idea of ourselves, because we're ever expanding beings. We're supposed to you shouldn't think the same way of yourself today as you did 10 years ago. You know, so we're supposed to be expanding. So I just try to challenge myself, because staying the same is a bad habit, you know? That's right. And it feels easy sometimes, even when you don't like the same that you've been, it feels easy. I want to keep pushing, because I didn't want to have this conversation. Dr. Pulley knows that I didn't want to have this conversation.
But I needed you to be a part of the conversation. so like when I was, we had a citywide meeting with the mayor and the police chief and clergies and dignitaries, and there was this woman in the crowd that was a heckler. And when the police chief got up to say something, you know, she would shout out and she would boo the mayor and she would do all these kinds of things. And so the police chief really desired to say some choice words to her, and he couldn't say it because he was on the mic and on TV and everybody was. So he was so, have you ever been so angry that you can't do what you really want to do and say what did you just start crying? And so he started crying because he could not say what he really wanted. And so the minister started coming around him and hugging him and comforting him and saying, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And so the heckler was like, ain't nobody gonna hug me? And they all kind of looked at her. And so I went into the crowd to hug her and say, you know, yes, it COVID and all that. I didn't do the.
I was ready. Did she have on a mask?
She didn't have on a mask. I didn't even. Lord. Wait a minute, she did have on a mask. I take that back. She had on a mask. I didn't have on a mask. And I hugged her, and I listened to her concerns because she felt like she was not being heard. That's why she was being a heckler in the crowd. And so I heard her, and so I talked to the mayor and said, what's going on? And she said, see, they'll listen to you because you are Dr. Pulley and you the pastor of the church. So they'll listen to you, but they're not going to listen to me. And so it was important for me to know, me coming in the crowd, giving her a hug, said that she mattered. But when I brought the mayor over to her, for not just for me to say what she said to the mayor, but for her to have the same conversation with the mayor that I was able to have with the mayor, then she knew she was equal. Not just that she mattered, but that she was equal to me, that I was no better than her, that she had just as much access to the mayor, and the mayor was going to hear her just like he was going to hear Dr. Pulley. And so I think it's important that we create these spaces to, yes, comfort people, to let them know, I feel your pain, but also create these spaces where their voices are being heard and where they're saying that they're equal, whether they have a title or a position, or whether they live in a certain zip code or drive a certain car, or whether they got a house or whether they're homeless, whatever the situation is, that you are just as much God's beloved offspring as I am. And so let me stand with you in solidarity and create a platform. Since I got the title and the position and they're going to listen to me, let me create a platform where they will hear you as an equal, as opposed to just you.
That's right. That's right.
I'm going to throw out the closing question for tonight. I'll give you, this has been a great conversation. I'll allow each of you an opportunity to ponder or think for a moment out. So I'm going to throw out the question. I'm going to do a commercial. And then each of you and then each of you will have 60 seconds to respond.
Go ahead, Bishop Hector.
Closing on tonight. But definitely we thank you, because we've had some great conversations on not only do we matter or are we equal, but what I really began to hear is no, we're not equal, and this is why we're not equal. These are the things that separate us. These are the things that divide us within ourselves and even outside of ourselves. And so I appreciate all of the thought around the oneness and the collective consciousness. And so the question becomes, it's a simple question, hopefully, and that is, what will it take to level the playing field? What will it take? Because we're having these conversations, but one thing I can't stand about a conversation is when there is no follow-up and there is no next step. So the question, what will it take to level the playing field? And so to the viewers, we welcome your thoughts as well. For you, in your mind, what is your thought? What will it take for you to level the playing field? We've had a great viewing audience on tonight. Our numbers were consistent. They were right there with us. They were affirming. They were either affirming or denying, but everything was in sync with what was going on. Next week, we're going to continue with part 3. Next week's topic deals with, if whites are privileged, what are we? That's next week's topic.
I like that.
And because we need to know, because we're talking about white privilege, and I hear us talking about white privilege, but I don't hear us talking about, so then what is the black factor? What is the black status? Do we just assume that we're underprivileged? No, that doesn't work for me. So that's part 3. And then the Kingdom Conversations will continue. And so we've got many suggestions, Dr. Pulley. And so if the people on the thread tonight have some suggestions, so we want to talk about women behind the pulpit. We want to talk about, why so many bishops in the world today. We want to, so we want to have those types of
the kingdom conversation.
Does the apostle go in front of your name, or does the apostle go behind your name? And church or COVID, which comes first? And so these are the conversations we desire to have. And so if any of you have topics or suggestions for Kingdom Conversation topics, we welcome you to share that on the thread, and we will certainly give that consideration. So, Reverend Cherie, all the way in California, where things are just so different. It's just so different over there. It's just so different.
Country of California.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what do we need? What would it take to fill the
playing field? What will it take?
The level of playing field. I'm starting a timer. I'm gonna do this in a Toastmasters minute. So honestly, it's love, right? So it's not just loving one another, but it's being love in action is what levels the playing field, because you're not fixated on getting your own. And so I think that it's that idea of love. It's an interest in oneness. Like, you just got to be interested in there being a level playing field, because with the interest comes the ideas. And right now we can use ideas to flood on how can we unite more and recognize one another for our wonderfulness and our differences, but not separate ourselves from one another in essence. And so I think that interest and focus, not to get distracted from this mission. I think that's how we level it, that we got to stay focused on it, and we got to continue to love one another and allow the ideas to flow that meet the moment. Like, there are new ideas that are going to come and meet the moment. That's my minute.
Love it. Thank you, Reverend Cherie Thompson, California. Bishop Dr. Kenyatta Arnett.
Oh, you put all the titles in there, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, listen. I've been learned tonight.
Don't even try it.
No, let me get to giggling. Yes, sir. What will it take to level this playing field?
To level the play, I think it's going to start with us owning our own truths. Mm-hmm. We have to get to the place where we own our own truths, and not only owning our own truths, but learning how to honor other people's stories. And I think that's where the divisiveness comes, because people don't want to hear your story. My story is more important than your story, but we have to start honoring other people's stories and learning how to see one another and authentically see each other and not just look at someone, but to actually see them and honor them for who they are. As unique and individual as we are, we have to see people for who we are and respect and honor that. And until we can get to those three places, I think we're going to keep in this same struggle.
Thank you, sir. All right. Woman of God, Elder Dr. Davina Jones. What will it take? And I do this in honor. There's no jesting, and there's no jesting. I'll make that clear because I will not take a rebuke.
Okay.
Amen.
I receive it.
What will it take?
I think it's going to take everything that the panelists have said. And I think practically it's going to take these types of conversations. I think it takes all of us to show up in the spaces that we occupy, ready to be light. Everybody didn't hear this alarm. So that means there will probably be another alarm. Everybody didn't hear this.
That's right.
So there's probably going to be another George Floyd somewhere down the road. That's not me trying to prophesy negativity, but
no, it's true.
This is a process. It is a journey of wakening up. And so ongoing, each generation will need to define its assignment and be sensitive, to hearing and doing the work that we've been called to do for this term. That's right. It will look like this. And everybody won't be doing the same thing at the same time. That's why some people are over here doing this and we here on Zoom, but it takes all of that.
That's right.
And so I think it'll take that, these that we're doing and other folks possibly yet giving their lives. Somebody said here in the thread that it will never be leveled. So that means we still have work to do because some people don't have the hope that this is that.
Yeah.
Some people don't have the hope. Somebody said this may never be. That's right. And these conversations, they help us. And Dr. Pulley mentioned Galatians, I think 6 and 9. That's my midday scripture this week. Don't give up in doing good. Don't give up in well doing. It pays off. It just doesn't all happen in one day. So we got to keep doing more of this and other stuff.
Courageous conversations.
Absolutely. And I didn't take it as negative, Doctor. I took it as a call to consciousness.
Absolutely.
That's how I received it. So thank you for that. Dr. Pulley, what will it take to level this playing field?
I will give this idea because I'm working with a client and she is a woman of color. And she said, I'm concerned about my son. I'm concerned about my grandson. If they're pulled over by the police, what can they do that will cause them not to be killed, not to be shot, not to be disrespected? And I said, what we got to do is we got to breathe. That it is in the breathing that we realize this oneness that we were talking about, because we're all breathing the same breath. I said, and if we can take a moment before the knee is on the neck and all that, get out the car and all the other stuff, if we can just take a deep breath and realize that I am one with this police officer, I am one with this, whoever the authority figure is, that I am one with them, and that we're all breathing the same breath. That breathing will help to see the oneness that I may be challenged to see in that moment because of the title or the position or the uniform. That if we can just take a moment to breathe and to know that that person is breathing as well, that will help us to connect with the unity of the spirit and the bond of peace. So I said, we got to keep breathing. Just breathe.
All right. Well, listen, thank you for this critical kingdom conversation. Thank you, each of you. Thank you to everyone that's watching by way of Facebook Live. Thank you for your feedback, for your input. Oh my goodness, this has been a great conversation. And so, Dr. Jones, will you close us out with prayer, please, ma'am?
Absolutely. We are so thankful. We're thankful for this moment. We are thankful for this evening. We are thankful for this platform. We give gratitude for even the elevation of consciousness that we participated in tonight. We give thanksgiving and gratitude for breath, as Dr. Pulley was mentioning earlier. We are so thankful and hopeful that we will not give up in doing well. We choose not to give up in doing well. And we thank you, Father God, Mother God. We give thanks, praise, glory, and honor in knowing the truth that it's all God and it's all good. And we give thanksgiving because we know the truth that good is always flowing from us and good is always flowing to us. Even when we don't see it, we know that out of chaos, there comes good. Out of chaos, there comes the order of God. Out of chaos, there comes the revelation of God, the revelation of good, the revelation of light. And so we give victory to that light. We give honor, praise, and glory to that light. It is in the name, through the power, and in the consciousness of Christ Jesus that it is so, and so it is. Amen.
We let it be. Amen.
Amen. To the faithful viewers,
This was awesome.
I'll thank each of you in the Zoom room once we end the live. But thank you to everyone, and everyone have a blessed and a safe evening.